Arguably the most talked about stat in all of sports is batting average. It was once the most valued stat in baseball, but has recently started to fall by the wayside in favor of more advanced stats. But some still see it as the most important thing to rate a player, while others argue you shouldn't even look at it while evaluating someone. So what is batting average, and why is there so much controversy over just one stat? The first thing we need to do is look at how it's calculated. To put it shortly, batting average is the percentage of times a player's at-bats ends in a base hit. You take the number of hits a player has and divide it by the amount of at-bats they have taken, and then you arrive at batting average. But there's still more to it, because batting average only considers at-bats and not plate appearances. So what's the difference? MLB.com defines it as an official at-bat comes when the batter reaches base via a fielder's choice, hit, or error, not including catcher's interference, or when a batter is put out on a non-sacrifice, whereas a plate appearance refers to each completed turn batting, regardless of the result. Plate appearances are all-encompassing, and at-bats account for hits, non-sacrifice outs, and errors. Why did it become so popular, and why do people not consider it valuable anymore? One of the things that has contributed to the conversation of batting average is that it is a quick stat to understand, and there are a lot of stories built around it, like the quest for hitting 400, something that hasn't been done since Ted Williams in the 40s, which was almost accomplished by Tony Gwynn in 1994 with a batting average of .394, or the quote by Roberto Clemente, "If you pitch me outside, I will hit 400. If you pitch me inside, you will not find that ball." Most big baseball quotes you hear involve denoting a player's skill by their batting average because it's so much quicker than saying, "If you pitch me inside, I'll have a BABIP of 600 and an ISO of 400. Also, humans just love aesthetically pleasing numbers. Hitting 300,000 yards receiving or rushing in football, averaging 20 plus points a game in basketball, or even a triple-double. Hitting 300 simply looks nicer than hitting 298, and we value it more than the actual additional value of 0.7%. Why do some value it highly while others don't consider it? The two main sides arguing batting average in baseball are the traditional and modern approach. Traditionalists would argue that batting average shows the batter's ability or inability to consistently get hits. Good batters get hits, so they will raise their batting average. It shows the batter's contact skill. It's a quick and easy stat to understand. It's a somewhat overall stat. I say somewhat overall because you could show a quarterback's average yards and touchdowns per game to get a reasonable picture of who he is, but without showing something like the average interceptions per game, it's not telling the whole picture. A more modern approach would argue that batting average weighs all hits equally, whether they're a single or for extra bases. Instead, they would use slugging average, which weighs each hit as the amount of bags they get rather than just one hit. Batting average doesn't consider walks at all. Instead, they would use on-base percentage, which adds walks and hits together to see how often the batter gets on base. It only measures the output, not the input, so bloop single counts the same as a hard line drive to the outfield. Instead, they would look at something like hard hit percentage, which shows how often a batter is hitting a ball more than 95 miles per hour. Doesn't consider the run environment the batter is in. Instead, they would use OPS+, which considers how other batters have performed in the same stadium and year. So someone hitting 30 home runs in the dead ball era is much more rewarded in this stat than in the steroid era. With more teams looking deeper into advanced stats and playing the percentages to build more wins, players and teams have begun valuing batting average less and less. What was once the definitive difference between an all-star and a bench player is now just one number in a list filled with OBP, OPS, slugging, hard hit percentage, ISO, BABIP, etc. While someone like Joey Gallo hasn't had the most recent success, he is still an above average hitter with a career OPS plus of 109 while still hitting under 200 throughout his career. In 2022, with pitchers throwing harder than ever before and the shift in its last year of play, the league saw its lowest league-wide batting average since 1967 with 242. Players today tend to focus more on hitting the ball out and are more okay with striking out compared to earlier eras, but there are still hitters that find success through having a high batting average like Luis Arias and Jeff McNeil, who both led their leagues in batting averages with .316 and .326 while still posting 130 and 140 OPS pluses respectively. Every player with a top 10 batting average was either an all-star or received MVP votes, except for Nathaniel Lowe, but he won a Silver Slugger, so it's fair to say that there was fair compensation. And with the shift being banned, larger bases, more favorable stealing rules, I expect there to be a bigger focus on a player's ability to put the ball in play and get on base. So while some value batting average too much, it has now gotten to the point where others don't even consider it at all. It may not paint the whole picture for how valuable a player is, but it is still a tool that can be used in consideration. A great batting average can mean nothing if the player never walks and never hits for extra bases. While underlying advanced stats can show what a player is expected to do with a larger sample size, it is still important to consider what the player is actually doing. Players may get drafted or signed for their potential, but they get the big contract for their output. To put it simply, the more hits you get usually means you're more likely to be successful. Granted, you are able to get extra base hits and still walk. So while batting average may not be the best stat to evaluate players, it can still be paired with other stats like slugging and OBP to get a full picture. And for that reason, I still encourage you to care about it, unless you're Stephen A. Smith using it for an argument for why Ohtani shouldn't win MVP.